Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Gia. I am a 26-year-old lady who lives in my mom's basement, and today is the September wrap-up. September was a great reading month for me. I had no DNFs, so thankfully that cursed time is over for now. I read 7 books, I read 1,731 pages, and just over 24 hours of audiobook. And we do have a cause for celebration because in September I met my yearly goal for the hours of audiobooks that I wanted to read. This year, I set a goal to listen to 250 hours of audiobook this year, and we met it. I've actually already exceeded it by 6 hours. I'm at 102%. As a result, though, I am behind on my pages goal. I'm about 700 pages behind, so I have to catch up. I just did the fall TBR video. I just filmed that, and I have that whole stack of books that were physical that I could actually show you, and they're sitting over there. So hopefully when I can get through those, we'll be on track for the pages goal for the year. September took some turns because we started out really strong and then it kind of fizzed out in the middle, and then at the end I was just reading books that unintentionally were dark and full of really atmospheric gothic horror elements that I didn't expect or pick on purpose. The moods this month were skewed towards dark, adventurous, and emotional, and my god, were they dark, adventurous, and emotional. 6 of the 7 books were fantasy, so that really tells you where I was. In fact, I don't even know which book wasn't considered. Oh, I know which one wasn't considered fantasy. That's a lie. It'll be very clear which one was not fantasy here in a minute. 2 of them were considered horror. That's a new category. That is a new category for us because we have fantasy, romance, young adult, and then horror. Horror has been read at the same amount as young adult in the month of September. That's a change. 4 out of the 7 reads were all ebooks, 1 was a print book, and 2 of them were audiobooks. And the star rating was a 407 with a range between 3 stars and 4.5 stars. My pages and minutes also stayed pretty consistent. I'm really proud of myself, actually. I didn't have any days where it was just a straight outlier. August really messed up my reading graph for a minute because at the very end of August was when I was trying to finish Once Upon a Broken Heart, and I had just finished another audiobook earlier that day or the day before, but it was past midnight, so I listened to over 1,000 hours of an audiobook in a single day, and it made all my other parts of the graph look really small. So once that passed, it was, it made it look a little bit better as far as the rest of the month goes. But I'm really proud of myself for staying really consistent with having really good reading days of about even upwards of 200 pages or 200 minutes a day. And I had a lot of those days. There were not, I mean, I read a little bit every day, or at least I try to, just to keep my Kindle reading streak. Next is Twisted Love by Anna Huang. I rated this 3 stars, and it was very hard to come to a solid star rating with this book because I had a lot of feelings about it. In fact, I wanted to do a smaller video on it on a couple of other books, like all mixed together. This is the second book I've read by Anna Huang. I read King of Wrath first, and I really, really liked King of Wrath. Anna writes romances with good backstories on the character. Her books don't open with he was a boy and she was a girl, can I make it any more obvious? We get really deep character backstories on both love interests, and I found that with King of Wrath, and I found that to be extremely compelling, and that's why I liked it so much, was that it wasn't just 2 rich people fucking. There was some character development and stuff going on in the background. So when I picked up Twisted Love, I was expecting something similar. It didn't necessarily hit as hard, and I know that that's not an uncommon criticism. I actually know that some people like the future books in this series more than the first one because, Grumpy Sunshine love stories are not bad, but it becomes exhausting when there is little character development between the grumpy person becoming changed by the sunshiny person. Like, I would want more character development other than, oh my god, they like me now. They're not as grumpy as they were 5 pages ago. And something that I found with this book is that we are introduced to Alex Volkov as a vindictive and vengeful and almost kind of downright evil and sadistic man who enters a budding friendship that turns into a situationship with his best friend's sunshiny little sister, and through the power of pussy, he's changed for the better. It made little sense because you tell me that he is like bent on revenge and has no emotions and doesn't want anything to do with this girl, and now he loves her. I liked the character backstories and the mystery that was going on in the background because I legitimately did not see the later parts of this book coming in any way. There were several literally twisted love because there were twists in this narrative that I didn't expect, and that's not a bad thing. It was giving very telenovela vibes, which is again not a bad thing. It just wasn't. It was a 3-star. It's a 3-star. It definitely had some faults. I have some other things to say, but I don't want this to be another hour-long wrap-up. So we're just gonna keep it moving. The next book that I read was Elektra by Jennifer Saint. It was a 4-star read for me, and I listened to it on audiobook. This is from the perspectives of 3 very famous women in ancient Greek history. It is before, during, and after the Trojan War from 3 different perspectives. You have Clytemnestra, who is the wife of Agamemnon, and she's also the sister of Helen, as in Helen of Troy. And then you have Princess Cassandra, who is Princess of Troy. She is Paris's sister. And then Elektra, who is Clytemnestra's and Agamemnon's youngest daughter. So you have these perspectives of 3 different women in talking about the Trojan War. The way that this can be broken down is in multiple timelines, because we start with Clytemnestra very early on in the timeline, where she and her sister Helen are about to get married, and Helen has her first marriage, and then Clytemnestra is married to Agamemnon, and she legitimately loves him and has like multiple kids with him. But then, of course, Helen betrays her husband Menelaus and runs off with Paris to go to Troy, and Agamemnon uses it as an excuse to start a really, really long war, and Clytemnestra is very tired of her husband being gone. Before Agamemnon became king, he had to kick out the person who kicked out his father, because Agamemnon was basically reclaiming his throne, so he had to kick out somebody else, and then the kid of the person he had to kick out, Clytemnestra basically begged him to spare his life so that the boy could live, because it wasn't his fault. And then that kid grows up, and then he shacks up with Clytemnestra when he's an adult, and they start to run the kingdom like they think that they should. And then Elektra, who is Clytemnestra and Agamemnon's youngest daughter, is very starry-eyed about her dad, so she just wants him to come home and doesn't understand why her mother feels the way that she does. So you're getting the perspective of mother and daughter. Then on the other side, you had Princess Cassandra of Troy, who we found out she wanted to be a priestess of Apollo, and Apollo visited her, and the priestesses are meant to be virgins, so she rejected Apollo when he came to her, and so he blessed her with the power of foresight, but cursed her at the same time, because she would have the power of foresight, but nobody would ever believe her. So you have Cassandra on the other side, who is cursed to have foresight that no one will believe, that she is constantly telling the people of Troy that Paris will live to bring the downfall of their kingdom, and that Helen will bring the downfall of their kingdom. And they sent Paris away, and he was supposed to be killed, but he came back. And it started this whole war. It's basically a biopic of 3 different women in a book, which I felt to be very insightful, because this was about a point of ancient Greek history that I knew loosely about, but it was nice to have it from a feminist perspective. This is just another book I would add to my non-existent high school English curriculum that I think kids should read, is a feminist perspective of the Trojan War. Next, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. I rated this 4.25 stars. I will keep my love of this book short because it is not everybody's flavor of tea. It's very ethnographic. It's very anthropological. It's giving what Babel did for me, but in a more clinical, academic writing way, because it's written like an academic piece of work, which it's done beautifully. It includes footnotes. I didn't read all the footnotes because I thought that I would get confused, like having it in an ebook format, and you have a footnote in the first page of chapter 1, and then 20 flips later, I don't remember what the footnote was about, so I didn't really read them. I would get confused. The book definitely took some turns that I didn't expect, but they were welcome. I also liked that Emily was an on-page canonical autistic person, and it was very clear. Like, the signs should have been for me all along. They were very clear. So I appreciated the representation. I think it was done rather well. I found Emily quite endearing, even if she was a kind of awkward, as I mean, all people who are on the spectrum can be at times, some more than others. I found her to be endearing and kind, even if she didn't always understand how to be. And she was very, not clinical, but precise about the way she went about things. She had a very specific way of doing the things that she was doing. And then Bramblebee, I think his name was, he just came in and like blew all that out of the water. I thought that they were a pretty cute little pair. The book can be a little slow paced at first, but it does take a very drastic, fantastical turn later in the book, and I really liked it. So if that's like kind of your vibe, I would go for it. Next, I read Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I rated this, again, 4.25 stars. This was one of the books that I didn't realize was horror until I picked it up. Now that I look at the cover, I can see why it's considered horror, but I didn't put two and two together until I started to read the book. This is more what I would consider Victorian horror instead of Gothic horror, and I know that that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's giving more of the energy of when you see and hear about a haunted house having a lady in white or a lady in blue, or like a cursed bride of some sort that just like floats around in a white dress, because you have your main character who doesn't speak. She doesn't speak at all. And she sees ghouls all over the place. And they're just like little sprites that hang around. And she can communicate with them. And they communicate with her in their own way. But she doesn't speak. And I was glad that we were introduced to a character who was nonverbal, that didn't become verbal in the end by like the power of love. So I was happy that we were introduced to a character who remained consistent, and that her becoming verbal was not part of her journey. This was about a character going through a journey who happened to be nonverbal, and the way that communication is done in this book is still rather well done, because there's evidence of signing being done. When you're introduced to a character who can speak to ghouls who can't speak either, their communication has to come in a different way. They sign to each other, they point, they, write, like send a message somehow. It's like physical communication. This was an extremely atmospheric read that reminded me a little bit of Coraline, because it had like the alternate house, like the other house. You can see it on the cover that there's two houses, because there's two houses. There's the normal and the not normal house. The main character, I looked up her name is Olivia. She leaves a school that is meant for girls to live at for a really long time, because she's claimed by a family member that she later finds out is already dead, and she goes to her family manor and interacts with her cousin, who is kind of curmudgeonly and grumpy and doesn't really want her there. And she unravels these secrets about her mother and her father and where she came from, and all these secrets that her family has, and then realizes that there's another house that's their house, but it's not. More things just start to become unraveled. It's a very scary, dark, mysterious, standalone book that I think really fits the vibe for a Halloween season. Next, I read The High Mountain Court by A.K. Mulford. I really enjoyed this as well. I rated this 4 stars. The things that I liked about this book are going to come out as jumbled nonsense, but I will try to keep it together. This book is about our girl Remy, R-E-M-Y, not R-E-M-I, like the rat in Ratatouille. She is possibly the last Red Witch alive, because she escaped a massacre that happened 13 years ago at her court, where all of her people lived, including her parents. They broke it down as multiple types of witches. So blue witches had foresight, green witches made delicious food and gardens grow, red witches could animate objects, and the brown witches were healers and expert foragers.
Hufflepuffs are particularly good finders.
What the hell is a Hufflepuff?
So Remy and her little duo of brown witches have been working at this tavern for the past year or so, and this group of men come in, and she realizes that they are glamored fae, and she goes, oh no, we gots to go. And the main guy in charge is the crown prince of the Eastern Kingdom, is looking for a red witch to help him in order to stop the war with the Northern Court. And the Northern Court is who killed the High Mountain Court. So like he feels as though she will want to help, because it would be in her best interest for like revenge reasons, but she doesn't know if she can trust him. So they go on a little Indiana Jones field trip to find some ancient relics to help her harness her power so that they can defeat the Northern King. And for spoiler reasons, I won't go into it now, but I will go into it when I talk about this book more in detail. See my comments about Twisted Love, because it's all gonna come together. All my thoughts are gonna come together. They're not bad thoughts. They're really not. I'm gonna bring some up right now, but they're gonna be as little spoilery as possible. So jumbled thoughts time, in no particular order, some things that I did like. You have a rather important secondary character that is canonically non-binary. Instead of being referred to as a prince or princess, they're considered the heir with a capital H. This is a pretty important and benevolent side character that helps initiate the plot, and they are featured in several points of the book. It's not like just sprinkled in there. Warning, this is a fated mate's romantasy. But they're a fated gaze. You have no idea how long I have waited for the fated gaze. It's right at the end. It's just a little snippet, but it exists, and thus there will be more, and we should be thankful for the crumbs. More jumbled thoughts time, but a bit more critical, so I'm going to sit back and straighten my spine. Sometimes when I am reading a fantasy or a romantasy, sometimes the fan fiction sensors start to go off, and usually for good reason, or it reminds me of something. And of course, no work is truly original. Everything is derivative, blah blah blah. Everything is a combination of tropes. It's just how you use them and whatever. There were some things. At about the 60% mark, there is a scene where Remy and Prince Hale have to go into a cave, and inside the cave there is a massive bioluminescent lake with a small little island in the middle of it with something on a slab that they have to get. They have to get an item that's like sitting in the middle of an island in the middle of a lake in a cave. And then they go up to the water and they see that there's bodies everywhere and that the lake is poisonous. Literally, the cave scene from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I couldn't unsee it. It didn't bother me, but it's the first time I had seen something like that was so specific. And then at the 70% mark, again, no spoilers, no context, but we are told from Remy's perspective through memories and her like talking about it, how the High Mountain Court was sacked by the Northern Court. The whole thing is basically the Red Wedding. And Remy is Arya because she escaped and was presumed dead. Again, no context, no nothing, but it was very, very similar. My only other light complaint is that the sex scenes were a bit unnecessary because there was 3 of them back to back, and it didn't make any sense to me why it was written that way. Like, the first one was fine. That one could stay. That one was perfect, well-timed. It was fine. And then there were 2 that immediately followed it. That was how I expected A Court of Silver Flames to go, by how people were talking about it. I was just expecting chapters of getting dicked down, and I didn't really get that. But the High Mountain Court, I definitely got that. And it was just a little unnecessary. It was just, the back-to-back was unnecessary. You have the stamina for that? I mean, I know that you're immortal, but couldn't be me. The last book I read in September was House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig, and this is the scariest book I've read in a while. Probably the scariest book I've read ever. It's a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses fairy tale, and it was not a fairy tale that I was very familiar with, so I wasn't walking in well prepared with what I got. I was expecting gothic horror, and I sure got it, but I also got some paranormal horror. There's ghosts, there's gore, there's vengeful spirits, there's gods. If you have a weak stomach, don't. I really wish that I had known that it was going to be horror before this. And it's not that I didn't like it. I really did like it. But it scared the shit out of me, if I'm being completely honest with you. There was just a lot more scary elements that I didn't expect in it. And I was expecting, you know how in Belladonna it was just basically a murder mystery with like a little bit of romance? I was expecting a murder mystery with a little bit of horror and a little bit of romance. You know how there's the meme with the making of the Powerpuff Girls and they're all like spilling everything in there, and when you get to the last one it was just oops, too much horror. This book legitimately scared the shit out of me, and I really can't talk about what it was that scared the shit out of me other than the trigger warnings that there's vengeful spirits, there's ghosts, there's gore, there's ghouls, there's gods and bargains, and just a lot. There's a lot of death. There's discussions of unaliving. There is a lot of grotesque imagery. This book is not shy. So if you are squeamish or if you are not into stuff like that, this is not for you. I would be very, very careful to recommend this to somebody who didn't like those kinds of elements. But if you do, this is a very good book for the Halloween October season. And I read this on accident. I did not realize it was going to be that scary. Also, I rated it 4.5 stars because although it scared the shit out of me, it was really good. So yeah, those are the 7 books that I read in September. It was an amazing reading month for me. At the time of recording this, it is October 2nd, almost October 3rd, because it's really late. The first book of October, I've DNF'd, so it's a return to form. Clearly, we're gonna go back to DNFing like every 4th or 5th book. Hopefully not, but we'll see. Anyways, that is all from me. Thank you so much for hanging out with me if you got to the end of this video. If you'd like to find me anywhere else, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Remember to drink water and be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything that you do, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.